If you've ever wondered why you can't stay consistent, why you fall back into old patterns, or why discipline feels like a battle, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. In this video, we'll explore the psychology behind your inner resistance using Carl Jung's timeless insights. We'll look at how your shadow influences your behavior, how trauma shapes your routines, and most importantly, how to transform discipline from punishment into devotion to your true self. Stay with us. What you're about to discover might not just change your habits, it could change your life. The modern world is obsessed with discipline. Wake up at 5, meditate, exercise, block your time, optimize your schedule. And yet, despite having access to more knowledge and tools than ever before, many people still find themselves stuck. They know what to do, yet they don't do it. Why? This is what Jung called a complex, a cluster of memories, emotions, and beliefs that form around a wound. When activated, the complex can override the ego. You might say, "Today I will write," but the complex says, "Last time we tried, we were humiliated. Let's not go through that again." And suddenly, you're scrolling, stalling, delaying. This is why force and shame never work. You cannot yell your shadow into obedience. You cannot bully the unconscious into silence. The only path forward is integration, the act of turning toward these rejected parts and listening. Not to indulge them, but to understand them. Not to act out their chaos, but to give them a seat at the table. This is the real work. It's not glamorous. It won't trend on social media, but it's where lasting change begins. Because until you know why a part of you resists discipline, you will forever be at war with yourself. So we begin with a simple but revolutionary idea. Resistance is a doorway. It points to what still hurts. It invites you to remember what you've forgotten, to reclaim what you've rejected, and to meet yourself not with judgment, but with deep, honest attention. This is not about being perfect. It is about being whole. And the moment you start making space for all that you are, even the parts that make you uncomfortable, is the moment you stop fighting and start healing. In the next section, we'll explore how these hidden parts form in childhood, how trauma reshapes our relationship to effort, and how to begin the journey of reclaiming the inner voices that hold the key to your freedom. Stay with me. Carl Jung would argue that the answer does not lie in willpower or strategy. It lies in the unseen depths of the psyche, in the unconscious, where our true motivations, wounds, and forgotten memories reside. At the surface level, discipline seems like a simple behavioral function. Set a goal, take action, repeat. But this logic belongs to the ego, the conscious, rational self. And the ego, while necessary, is not the whole of who we are. Beneath it lives a vast symbolic world that Jung called the unconscious. It is here that our patterns are born, and it is here that resistance takes root. Imagine this. A person sets out to run every morning. The night before, they're motivated. They lay out their shoes, set their alarm, visualize success. But when morning comes, their body refuses to cooperate. They snooze the alarm, feel shame, and call themselves lazy. The cycle repeats. But laziness is rarely the cause. Jung would say this moment of failure is not a matter of character. It's a message. The unconscious is not passive. It is alive. And it speaks not in words, but in patterns, repetitions of behavior, emotional tension, fatigue, or inner conflict. When you consistently fail to follow through, it is often not because you don't want success, but because something deeper is afraid of what success might mean. Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown, because society, family, or culture taught us they were unacceptable. These might include anger, selfishness, freedom, desire, or even vulnerability. Over time, we exile these parts to the unconscious, thinking we are becoming better. But the truth is, what we reject does not disappear. It festers, it waits, and it acts out when we least expect it. Let's say, for example, that as a child, you learned that being still or unproductive was lazy. So you pushed yourself to always achieve, always hustle, always perform. But now, as an adult, your inner world is exhausted. The part of you that longed for rest was never met with kindness, only punishment. Now, when you try to build discipline, that shadowed part fights back. It drags your energy down. It pulls your attention elsewhere. It sabotages your efforts, not because it hates you, but because it still remembers the pain of being ignored. This is not sabotage, it's communication. Jung believed that inner resistance was often the psyche's attempt to protect itself. If you were once shamed for trying and failing, your unconscious might now protect you by avoiding effort altogether. If you were taught that rest equals worthlessness, the part of you that desires freedom will rebel against any structure. What appears to be a lack of discipline is more often an unresolved contradiction between who you think you should be and who you truly are. If we wish to understand why we resist the very things we say we want, discipline, growth, change, we must journey backward, not forward. Carl Jung taught that much of adult suffering is rooted in the forgotten years of early life, where our identity was shaped not through choice, but through adaptation. You may find the voice of a 7-year-old who never felt good enough, or a teenager who was mocked for trying. These parts are not weak. They are protective. They hold the emotional memory of experiences your adult mind has long since buried. To engage with these parts is not regression, it is recovery. You are retrieving the fragments of self you once had to abandon in order to belong, and in doing so, you begin the work of integration. This is not about indulging the past, it is about reconciling with it so that it no longer controls your future. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. Often we carry generational wounds, beliefs passed down unconsciously, like scripts we didn't write. Beliefs about work, success, and suffering. To become disciplined in the truest sense is not to follow rules. It is to break the old scripts and write a new one that reflects your authentic self." In the next segment, we'll look more closely at how shadow work allows us to retrieve those hidden parts, how to meet resistance without fear, and how to build a relationship with yourself that leads to sustainable, aligned action. Because the goal is not to conquer yourself, it is to become whole. As children, we are not born disciplined or undisciplined. We are born open, sensitive, impressionable, vulnerable. And in this open state, we absorb everything: the moods of our caregivers, the values of our culture, the silent messages about what is acceptable and what is not. We learn quickly what earns us love, praise, and safety, and what triggers punishment, neglect, or shame. To survive, we adapt. We mold ourselves into the version of self that feels safest in the eyes of those around us. Jung referred to this constructed identity as the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. But behind that mask, parts of us are quietly exiled. The curious, emotional, wild, creative, rebellious aspects of our being that did not fit the mold are pushed into the unconscious. Over time, this splitting creates a tension, a growing chasm between who we have learned to be and who we truly are. Consider this: a child who was scolded for being too sensitive may grow up suppressing their emotional life. As an adult, they become logical, composed, productive. But when they try to implement discipline, rigid schedules, strict habits, they begin to feel a strange discomfort. It's not laziness. It's the neglected inner child trying to be heard. That child, once shamed for needing gentleness, now revolts when the adult self becomes too rigid. Another example. Imagine a young boy repeatedly told that failure is unacceptable. Each time he tried something new and faltered, he was met not with support, but criticism. Over time, he learned risk equals danger. Mistakes equal shame. So he stopped trying. As an adult, he says he wants to build a new career or develop a habit, but each time he moves toward it, fear floods in. The resistance is not against the goal, it is against the pain that once followed effort. The unconscious doesn't distinguish between past and present, it only remembers. Jung believed that trauma, even subtle or chronic forms, etches patterns into the psyche. These patterns become automatic. We react not to reality, but to memory. This is why so many people ghost their own goals. They are not lazy, they are wounded, and every new beginning threatens to reopen an old wound. This is the origin of the complex, a psychological knot formed from repeated emotional experiences. A discipline complex might contain the shame of being judged, the fear of failing publicly, or the belief that no matter what you do, you'll never be enough. When triggered, the complex overrides your willpower. It clouds your vision, generates anxiety, or pulls you into avoidance. You might say, "I just don't feel like it today," but beneath that is an unconscious echo. It's not safe to try. This is why behavior-based solutions often fail. You can set alarms, write affirmations, build vision boards, but if your unconscious associates effort with pain, it will resist. And that resistance will feel irrational, even maddening, until you stop treating it like an enemy and begin treating it like a clue. Jung taught that healing happens through conscious integration. That means turning inward with curiosity rather than condemnation. When you feel yourself avoiding a goal, don't push harder. Ask, what part of me is speaking right now? What is it trying to protect me from? When did I first feel this fear? Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In our pursuit of discipline, we often make a critical mistake. We treat resistance as the enemy and force as the cure. We try harder, push stronger, shame deeper. But the more we fight ourselves, the more we split ourselves in two. And from this division, the shadow grows. And this wholeness changes everything. When the shadow is acknowledged, it no longer needs to hijack your behavior. It becomes a source of insight, intuition, and even power. You realize that your so-called undisciplined parts have been trying to teach you something all along, that structure without soul is a prison. But when discipline is rooted in love, when it honors your needs, your pain, your truth, it becomes a sacred act of remembering who you are. So if you've been stuck in cycles of inconsistency, ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What emotion have I been afraid to feel? What belief have I inherited that no longer serves me? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Because discipline without self-awareness becomes self-abandonment. And the goal is not to abandon yourself, it is to reclaim yourself. In the next section, we will explore how to put this inner work into practice, how to create structures that support, not suppress your wholeness. We'll look at how to move from resistance to responsibility, from fragmentation to alignment. And most importantly, how to live with more integrity, not with who you were told to be, but with who you truly are. Stay with me. The journey inward is just beginning. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not evil, it is simply the unknown. It is made up of all the aspects of ourselves we have repressed, denied, or deemed unacceptable. These parts do not vanish. They are stored in the unconscious, and they influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in ways we cannot see until we are ready to confront them. Let's imagine someone who repeatedly fails to maintain a consistent routine. They plan with clarity, they speak with intention, yet the execution collapses. Why? It's easy to blame willpower. But deeper down, the person may be carrying a shadow part that resents control. Perhaps they were raised in a strict household where autonomy was crushed, where love was conditional on performance. Now, as adults, every self-imposed rule feels like a return to that emotional prison. The shadow says, no more. And so, the routine fails not out of weakness, but as an act of unconscious rebellion. This is where discipline becomes dangerous, when it's used not as a structure for growth, but as a weapon of self-repression. Jung understood that the psyche does not tolerate oppression, even if it's self-inflicted. If a part of you feels exiled, punished, or unheard, it will not quietly disappear. It will resist. It will sabotage. It will act out, not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged. The undisciplined part of you is not a flaw. It is a signal, and often it holds wisdom you've ignored. Maybe the part that wants to sleep in is exhausted not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Maybe the part that skips your morning run isn't lazy, it just remembers the shame of being judged in gym class, the sting of failure, the humiliation of being left behind. To do shadow work is to sit with these parts and say, I see you. I hear you. You are allowed to exist. You don't act on every impulse. You don't surrender to chaos. But you also don't pretend these impulses aren't there. You integrate them. You create a dialogue between your adult self and your inner parts. You shift from inner warfare to inner relationship. Here's the paradox. The more you try to suppress the shadow, the louder it gets. But when you listen to it, its grip loosens. The part of you that once sabotaged your goals begins to soften. You begin to see discipline not as punishment, but as care. Not as rigidity, but as structure, chosen with compassion. Let's make this real. Take 5 minutes and write a letter from your shadow. Let it speak freely. Don't censor. Let it say what it's angry about, what it's tired of, what it's afraid of. You might be surprised to find a wounded child or a silenced teenager beneath the surface. Then, write a response from your conscious self, not to correct or override, but to understand. This practice builds integration, and integration is the foundation of sustainable discipline. Because true discipline doesn't come from dominating your inner world, it comes from aligning it. When your conscious and unconscious parts walk in the same direction, you move forward with clarity. You stop ghosting your goals. You stop cycling through guilt and procrastination. You begin showing up not as a fractured self, but as a whole one. We've now traveled through the terrain Jung called the unconscious, the hidden landscape, where discipline often fails before it begins. We've seen how childhood wounding creates inner contradictions and how the shadow, those parts of ourselves we silence, rises up to challenge even our best intentions. But what happens next? How do we take all this awareness and turn it into transformation? Track emotional resistance. When you avoid a task, pause. Ask, what am I feeling right now? Write it down. Over time, you'll see patterns not of laziness, but of unspoken needs and forgotten fears. Dialogue with your inner parts. Literally write from the voice of your inner child, your critic, your rebel. Then respond from your adult self. This creates inner cooperation rather than chaos. Create symbolic rituals. Light a candle before you begin a task. Play a song that represents strength. Use physical movement, sound, or space to ground your unconscious in the present. Allow imperfection. Consistency is not about never falling, it's about always returning. Let your discipline reflect compassion, not control. Surround yourself with reminders of your inner truth. Visual cues, quotes, and even colors or objects that speak to your wholeness can anchor your deeper self in moments of doubt. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The undisciplined life is often not a choice, but a consequence of an unexamined inner world. But the moment you begin to turn inward, not with judgment, but with presence, you reclaim your direction. Discipline, then, is no longer a cage. It becomes a compass, a quiet, steady practice of returning to yourself again and again. And that is how transformation begins, not with force, but with truth. In the final section, we'll explore how to bring all of this together, how to craft a new narrative of self-respect, conscious structure, and integrated living that allows you to stay consistent, not out of fear, but out of love. Stay with me. The journey is becoming whole. Jung believed that the goal of the human journey is individuation, a process of becoming whole, not perfect. And at the heart of individuation is integration, no part of the self left behind, no voice exiled, no feeling deemed unworthy. In the context of discipline, this means we no longer view resistance as the enemy. We begin to ask, how can I build habits that honor every part of who I am? Let's begin here. Discipline is not about control. It is about relationship. A relationship between your conscious desires and your unconscious needs. Between the part of you that wants to rise early and the part that wants rest. Between the voice that pushes for greatness and the one that fears rejection. Most people try to conquer these inner contradictions with pressure, shame, or suppression. But Jung would ask us instead to listen, to hold both voices, and to create a path forward where neither part is sacrificed. Consider the example of someone who wants to start writing every day. The ego, the conscious self, says, "It's time. Let's do this. Let's become disciplined." But deep inside, another voice whispers, "What if I'm not good enough? What if no one cares?" That voice might come from an inner child who was once ridiculed for being expressive. If that voice is ignored, it will find ways to sabotage the plan by distracting you, numbing you, or convincing you to delay. But what if instead of dismissing the fear, you acknowledged it? What if you made a small agreement? I will write for 10 minutes, not to be perfect, but to show up with honesty. You'd be creating not just a habit, but a bridge between your inner world and your outer actions. This is conscious discipline, not force, but integration. Jungian psychology also reminds us that symbols matter. The unconscious speaks in symbols, images, and emotional tone, not logic. So if discipline feels like punishment, your psyche will resist. But if it becomes a symbol of devotion, a sacred practice of honoring your truest self, it begins to feel different. You are no longer enforcing a routine. You are showing up for the soul. Try reframing your daily habits through this lens. Don't just go to the gym, move your body as a way of reclaiming vitality. Don't just meditate, sit in stillness as a way of honoring your need for quiet in a noisy world. Don't just plan your day, design it as a space where all parts of you are welcome, the driven, the tired, the hopeful, the afraid. Let each act of discipline become a ritual, a moment of conscious engagement with the self. This also means giving yourself grace. Healing is not linear. Some days the shadows will rise stronger. Some days the old patterns will win. But this does not mean you've failed. It means the psyche is still integrating. Jung never promised ease, only depth. And the work of becoming whole is sacred, even when it is slow. Here are a few practices you can begin today to deepen this process. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And perhaps that is the invitation discipline has been offering you all along, not to perfect yourself, but to awaken. You are not undisciplined because you are weak. You are not inconsistent because you are broken. You are a complex, multifaceted being carrying years of untold stories, unseen wounds, and forgotten strengths. What you call procrastination may be protection. What you label as sabotage may be the voice of a long-buried part of you asking, begging to be heard. To walk the path of true discipline is not to force obedience. It is to foster relationship between the conscious mind that dreams and the unconscious soul that remembers. It is to integrate the shadow, reclaim the exiled self, and create a life built not on suppression, but on alignment. When your inner world is in harmony, your outer habits become sustainable, not through effort, but through resonance. This is the alchemy of self-awareness. It is not something you master in a weekend. It is a practice, a conversation with your deeper self that unfolds across a lifetime. But every moment you choose compassion over criticism, curiosity over control, presence over performance, you take one step closer to wholeness. So let go of the lie that says discipline must hurt. Let go of the voice that tells you you're not enough unless you do more, achieve more, become more. You are already enough. And from that truth, you can build a discipline not rooted in fear, but in love. A discipline that honors every part of you. If this video stirred something in you, if you felt seen, understood, or even just a little more human, then I invite you to keep walking this path with us. There is more to uncover, more healing to do, and more of yourself to remember. Subscribe to my channel for more deep, soulful content on shadow work, Jungian psychology, and the inner architecture of transformation. And if this resonated with you, I would love to hear your reflections. Leave a comment below. What part of your shadow are you learning to accept? What does discipline now mean to you? Your story matters, your inner world matters, and your journey toward becoming whole is not just valid, it's vital. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, stay true.